Hey guys, and welcome back to another Brave 9 video. This one is going to be, as promised, a tier list for April 2020. And the whole reason why I'm doing this video is because I see a lot of people asking the same question, which is, how do I climb in Arena? It seems like everyone has maxed out mercs. I see plus 12 Nautis in silver. What am I gonna do? How do I beat them? Etc, etc. So, to answer this question, I think in general, to be successful in Arena, there are two big parts to it that you absolutely have to get right. The first one being, you have to know the kinds of mercenaries that are absolutely rocking the meta right now. It's not going to be enough to use mercenaries that are simply usable or kind of good in the arena, especially if you want to climb all the way to Ruby or Grandmaster. You definitely have to use top tier mercenaries. Anything below that will give you a big disadvantage. So that's the whole purpose of this video. I might do, I guess, a two-part series answering this question. The first one being this video, which is a tier list, which will give you an idea of what those kinds of mercenaries are. And in the second part, I'll talk about formations, because formations arguably might be even more important than the mercenaries that you're having. You need both of them. You need good mercenaries and you need a good formation. But if it's down to two teams with the same level of mercenaries, maybe your opponent's even slightly better than you in terms of mercenaries, if your formation beats his, you can beat him, no problem. So a lot of free-to-play players, actually the successful ones in Arena, they don't have super crazy runes on their mercenaries, they don't have plus 15 everything, and they can still make it to Grandmaster, and a large part of that is due to their formation. So yeah, in the second part I might talk about formations, but for this one, let's just focus on the mercenaries. Okay, so I've just put this here because I think it's important to know who this video is going to be applicable to. So if you're struggling to climb anywhere to Sapphire, Ruby, and Grandmastery, maybe you might find this video helpful. Obviously, if you already do better than I have, then feel free to comment on anything you feel like I've said wrongly, or just if you have any opinions, definitely leave them in the comments. I will be really thankful for that because I'm trying to learn and improve as well, and I'm sure the community will also really appreciate it. Okay, that's it for the introduction. Let's actually move on to the warriors. I've sort of divided this into three tiers. This will be the same for all the other classes as well. So we have good, very good, and broken. The numbers that you see in rounded brackets out of 10 basically means the number of top 10 players who use that particular mercenary. So for example, we have Eden at 9 out of 10. That means that 9 out of the rank 1 to 10 players have Eden in their team. The number in the square brackets represent the minimum skill level that I think, and this is just my opinion, but it's a level that I think the mercenary should be skilled up to minimally to perform at the level that I'm referring at right here. So let's start off with Eden. Now, what makes Eden so damn good and so damn annoying to deal with? He has 100% defense, permanent, so it can't be cancelled out with nullifier or anything like that. And he deals defense ignoring damage as well. On top of that, his defense ignoring damage is off the charts. He can very easily kill pretty much everyone except for, I think, if you buff mercenaries with Albion and give them insane agility stats plus reduced incoming damage. Eden might struggle a little bit there, but other than that, yeah, Eden absolutely smashes anyone. This buff of his lasts for, I believe, 50 turns, so after that he's gonna lose a lot of his attack, but usually it's still pretty good. I've faced Eden beyond 50 turns, and even without any supporters buffs, he can still clear Cecilia and other mercenaries like that, so it's not gonna be too much of a problem for him. Plus, most battles don't last beyond 50 turns. It's not uncommon, but it's definitely not common. So given these things, Eden seems really broken, right? But he does have a weakness, which is mercenaries with skills that can reduce his stats, including the defense stat, that aren't of stats weakening type. So Eden has stats weakening immunity, which means curse and some other things won't affect his defense, but units like Glacia has a freeze that reduces his defense. So it's not stats weakening, it will reduce Eden's defense, and then you can start attacking him. Unless of course you already deal defense ignoring damage like Nartis and Dalvi, they'll be able to kill Eden. But yeah, units like Glacia, units like Kyria, I guess Kyria has a DOT skill that actually weakens stats. So Eden is not going to be immune to that, and I guess these are some of the ways that you can counter Eden. However though, what makes Eden so good is that if your team has run out of additional defense ignoring damage dealers, so in my team I have Nartis and Dalvi who can deal defense ignoring damage. Once those two are dead in my team, and if the opponent team still has Eden alive, I'm not gonna win that match. It doesn't matter how many other mercenaries that I have. I actually lost a 7v, I don't know, just 7v very few with Eden in the team. I recorded that video, I'll put it up on the screen for you guys to see. But as you can see in that video, I just absolutely got wrecked by Eden. I just couldn't do anything to him because I don't deal defense ignoring damage. Meanwhile, he has high damage, he deals defense ignoring damage, so obviously he's gonna end up winning. As you can tell from the use rate, out of the top 10 players, 9 out of 10 players use Eden, and honestly, reviewing all the Grandmaster teams, I actually clicked one by one. It really seems like 90% of Grandmaster teams use Eden. I see him everywhere in World Arena, especially when you're limited to 3 mercenaries. He's a good replacement for Angelica, who is a legendary, so that means you can omit Angelica from your team, replace her with Eden, and then you're free to put another legendary in your team, which is going to be a huge benefit. So Eden is not only good in Arena, he's even more valuable in World Arena, and that's what I think makes him broken. So why doesn't everyone use Eden, right? Well, he's kinda hard to obtain, just a little bit, you know, like 40,000 mileage. On top of that, you still have to plus 15 him and have really good defense runes on him to bring his defense up to 100%. So that's why usually only veteran players have Eden, and although he's just so good, not every team is going to have him. You usually see him only in really high tiers where the veteran players are at. That being said, however, you don't have to have Eden to land a spot in Grandmaster. As you can see, I don't have Eden as well, so it's definitely possible, but if you do get Eden, you have to build him. He is just insane as a warrior. Now, moving down to Yuri, Christina, and Angelica in very good tier. Now, I'll talk about Angelica first because she's kind of similar to Eden, right? Angelica also has 100% defense. She also has quite a lot of damage in her ability to deal damage as a percentage of enemies' max HP. The difference between her and Eden is that her additional damage does not ignore defense. It does, however, ignore reduced incoming damage. So she's going to be a little bit better in dealing with mercenaries with high HP but low defense, like Sheena, mercenaries buffed by Albion, I believe. Angelica should do a little better than Eden there. However, Eden still ranks higher because Angelica can't deal with defense Sheena or defense Grandhilder. She also can't deal with Glacia, who has defense runes most of the time. Whereas Eden, I still see him quite frequently one-shotting Glacia. It might be just really strong Edens or my Glacia sucks, but that's just the case that I notice. Anyway, from the use rate, you can clearly tell Angelica is good. She does a lot of things that Eden can do, but she's just not as good as Eden. However, she's really good and she is a staple in a lot of teams that I know. More prominently, Grandhilder is present in a lot of teams as well. And if you don't have either Eden or Angelica, it's really hard to get rid of Grandhilder unless you have Libya, I guess, which isn't run all that often nowadays. So that's why they're at such a high tier, because you have to have them dealing with most teams who play Grandhilder. Angelica also has better defense overall than Eden, because not only is Angelica immune to stats weakening like Eden, she has debuff immunity, which makes her immune to all kinds of debuffs. So her defense doesn't ever go below 100%. She's not affected by any kinds of mercenaries like Glacia, Kyria, like I mentioned for Eden just now. She's also easier to obtain than Eden, despite being a legendary, which is kind of a joke. But although I write plus 15 there, she is usable at plus 12, where she can potentially get 100% defense already, unlike Eden. But if you want that extra 2 tile range and also to have less pressure on your need for defense runes, I would still recommend that you get her up to plus 15 if you can, but only if you can. Okay, that about does it for Angelica. Now let's move on to Yuri. Yuri is quite a recent addition with the recent release of her companion, and she's been upgraded a lot ever since. She has a 2 count Death Guard, which I guess you can kind of count as 1 in the end because she only takes 1 hit. Usually she dies by the second hit if the second hit has additional damage, so she's only able to block 1 hit, but sometimes that can be pretty crucial. That means that you can play her in a position where, like say, if she's at the back or the front, at the back, if Ludmilla hits her, she's still going to be alive. And by the second round, Ludmilla is probably not going to be there anymore to take care of her, so she survives, right? If you put her at the front, she can survive a hit from Eden or Dalvi because she takes 1 hit. Although it's a really strong warrior, she has Death Guard and nothing can override that. So Yuri can survive pretty well. And with the recent upgrade, she has additional damage as well, which pumps her damage up quite a lot, having already a pretty high base attack stat, base crit damage stat, and I believe on crit rate as well. On top of that, which is some stuff that's quite nice to have, she has buffs whenever she kills enemies, and that's a buff that is irremovable. So she's gonna get an attack increase whenever she kills an enemy, which is going to happen quite often, especially if you use her as the initiator or the second to hit. She also gets buffs when she attacks, regardless of whether she kills the enemies or not, but that buff can be removable, so not really dependable, but still it's kind of a nice thing to have, I guess. Note that she doesn't have any kind of immunity though, so you have to watch out for that when setting up your formation. Yuri is also a decent counter to Albion teams, so although she's not going to be able to kill Grenhilder, who is usually who Albion buffs, she will be able to take out Albion. So if you don't have a sufficiently strong Angelica to take care of Grenhilder, at least you know that Albion is not going to be able to buff Grenhilder anymore on the second turn because Albion will be dead, killed by Yuri. Yuri needs slightly less investment than the other mercenaries here, only needing a plus 13 because that's where she gets 200% additional damage. I believe plus 14 simply gives her a bit more to the buffs on attack, which is usually cancelled anyway, so it's not that important. It's something nice to have, but not too essential for Yuri to function. And when you get her to plus 15, that's where you get the option to switch her to a plus pattern instead of the usual X pattern that she attacks in. And you can sort of toggle between both of them by bringing her between plus 14 and plus 15. You can just remove one soul gear and that's how you do it. So Yuri is versatile with her unique Death Guard skill as a warrior, also dealing pretty good damage, big range. She deserves a spot in very good tier. Now next up we have Christina. So Christina is a really good counter to Lucius. Especially if you pair her with Elijah. That's a combo that I see quite often. So Elijah places a focus on the first mercenary, and she has taunt ignore as well, so she's guaranteed to hit the first mercenary of whatever lane she's in, and Christina can go ahead and attack that mercenary in front. So this is good for teams that run Lucius right in front. If you happen to be in a row where it's not the opponent's main row, Beyond that, Christina also has some pretty good DOT. She should be able to kill Glacia really easily. She also kills Sheena, Nartes, Yuri, Ludmila for sure. So if your row happens to be the same as your opponent's main row, having Christina go ahead with her 3 tile range in the same row is going to be quite devastating. You'll usually take out at least 1 mercenary. She doesn't have defense ignoring damage, but she has her special uses with Lucius and other Death Guard units like Yuri. One more thing to mention is that she also has debuff immunity and 100% defense when attacking, so she's not going to die to reflect or anything like that. She usually can also take out skeletons because of her really low attack stat, so this can be a bonus if you're facing a lot of Goliath teams. Note that she does have to be at plus 15 though. I'm not sure which skill it is. I believe it was the defense one. So if you don't have Christina at plus 15, if she's plus 14 or below, she's not going to have 100% defense when attacking, and that's going to kill her due to reflect because Refi is everywhere. So she does have to be plus 15. You need to invest a lot in her for it to function, but she does belong in the very good tier, so it's something that you would want to invest in for now. Last but not least, definitely not least, we have the good tier. Now this is kind of 50-50 for me, because although based on usage you can see that Dalvi and Ludmila obviously have way lower usage than units in the very good tier, but Dalvi is still a very solid unit to have, and if you don't have units like Eden who deals defense ignoring additional damage, you have to have Dalvi. It's going to be really hard even if you have Nartes, because the moment your Nartes dies to a Grand Holder that you fail to get rid of in the same lane, that's it. You're not going to have any more defense ignoring damage dealers that are in the meta right now, apart from Libya if you do play her. Ludmila is also an option, but Ludmila also falls into the same trap of dying to Grand Holder, and if the opponent team happens to have Eden, which is very rife in the higher tiers of Arena, you're not going to be able to kill Eden and you're just dead on the spot. So having Dalvi as another source of defense ignoring damage is definitely something that you might want in your team if you don't have Eden, just in case your Nartes screws up and dies to Grand Holder without killing Eden. Overall, she's still a good unit. She has some pretty decent damage. She's able to get rid of Cecilia if she's placed in front in your opponent's team. She's a decent initiator because some people, in order to counter Yuri, they put units like Eden or Angelica in front, which Dalvi should be able to comfortably take care of. The only downside to Dalvi is that she rotates between human form and fox form. In human form, she's absolutely useless, and that makes her inconsistent. You can set it up in such a way where if you have Dalvi go early, she's usually not going to be in human form until quite late in the game. I would say maybe 30-40 turns, where she's vulnerable during the opponent's turn, but she's still not as consistent as Eden in that regard. Overall, Dalvi is not overwhelmingly powerful in this day and age, but she is kind of a solid unit, and I do see her quite a lot in World Arena, more so in Arena, and that's understandable because you have the legendary restriction there. She's a good unit for sure. Note that you have to have her at plus 15 though, if you want her 3 tile range, which is actually a lot more useful than people might think. Yes, she has 100% defense, she has the same number of turns for her fox form, etc. But the 3 tile range really makes a difference, and I would definitely recommend her at plus 15 if you want to climb all the way to Ruby and Grandmaster. The other mercenary in the good tier is Ludmila. Now, Ludmila actually arguably is very much more important in other modes of the game, like Guild War, where you can kind of see where your opponent places their formations. Anyone playing a magician at the back with no proper defense, Ludmila is going to take care of really easily, and chances are you're going to win the game. So Ludmila is really good for that. However, in Arena, if you place Ludmila in a row where it's not their opponent's main row, you're likely gonna hit Glacia or Grand Holder. You might be able to kill Grand Holder when she's unbuffed, but Lumila still dies to Grandholder. And if the opponent runs Sheena, that's going to trigger the opponent's Sheena, which is not ideal for you. So Ludmila kind of works. She has some pretty good things about her, like dealing damage ignoring defense as well, which is an option to deal with Eden. But she's very, very risky because if your formation doesn't line up with the opponent's formation and it's not ideal, Ludmila is going to be quite useless in that scenario. So that's why you can see her usage, along with Delvi, just isn't as high as the other ones. She's not as core to a team as the other warriors might be, I guess. So that's why she's in the good tier. In summary, for warriors, I will definitely expect to see a lot of Yuri, Christina, Angelica in the higher tiers of Arena, such as Crystal, maybe even Diamond. So Diamond, Crystal, Sapphire, Ruby, and Grandmaster, you'll be seeing a lot of them. Eden, you might start seeing in Sapphire and above, I'm not too sure. I'm talking about plus 15 Edens, by the way, plus 14 Edens are quite useless. But plus 15 Edens, yeah, you will see them Sapphire onwards, perhaps. Delvi and Ludmila, you might still see them all the way to higher tiers. However, the usage is going to go down the higher you climb into Ruby and Grandmaster. But so if you're in silver or gold or something like that, if you're trying to climb, you can definitely still rely on units like Delvi and Ludmila. They should still be able to serve you pretty well into the higher tiers like Sapphire, but as you climb by then, you probably want to get at least 1 or 2 of Yuri, Christina, and Angelica, add them to your team so that you have some really good reliable damage dealers. If you're striving for Grandmaster, I can't really say go ahead and get Eden because he's just so freaking hard to get. But if you do have Eden, definitely try to build him because he's going to be quite a game changer for you in Grandmaster. It's a bit of a disadvantage if you don't have Eden, to be really honest. There's been just too many moments in Grandmaster where I've been fighting a team with Eden, and just because I didn't have Eden, I lost. So Eden is extremely powerful. Don't stress too much if you can't get him, because you can still end up in Grandmaster with a really good formation and other good mercenaries. But tier wise, Eden will still be the #1 warrior for me. Moving on to defenders now. I don't think there's any defender that's really broken like how Eden is as a warrior, especially being a 5-star instead of a legendary. For defenders, obviously Lucius with all his insane 5 death guards, 6 if you have Lucius at plus 10. It's really hard to deal with unless the opponent has Christina, but that's exactly the point. Quite a few teams I've noticed run Elijah plus Christina, and that usually takes care of Lucius. I see that quite a bit in the World Arena. So Lucius does have weaknesses like that, but overall, if you can't get Christina to hit Lucius for whatever reason, you will still have to hit him 5 times before you get through him, which is why he is top of the list here. He's also very, very easy to use. You can have 5 death guard counts even with him at plus 0, so you don't really need to invest in him. I've seen people even use 5-star on Awakened Lucius in Arena, and it works pretty much the same. So if you can manage to summon one of him, I would recommend you summon for him first out of all the other legendaries as of right now. That might change depending on how the plus 15 Octos go along, but I don't think you can really go too wrong with Lucius. As you can tell from his usage as well, we have 9 out of 10 in the top 10 players using Lucius. He's just everywhere. He starts appearing even in, I think, gold. People already have Lucius, and you're gonna see a lot of him all the way up to Grandmaster. So that justifies his almost broken tier, I think. On the other hand, Grandholder is not that far off behind. She is used by 8 out of 10 of the top 10 players, and it's easy to see why. So Grandholder has a skill that allows her to reflect some damage. She also reflects not only damage but debuffs, and I'm pretty sure that's a skill that's only unique to her. What that means is that, say for example Angelica attacks her. Angelica has a buff prohibition debuff that she applies to whoever she attacks, but not only does Grandholder not get the buff prohibition debuff, she reflects it back to Angelica, and Angelica applies the debuff on herself. So that's quite an annoying thing to deal with if you're fighting against Grandholder. She's pretty tanky as well. With a decent HP stat, you can easily get her to up to 30k HP, especially if you give her soul gears. So when she's buffed, she's pretty much unkillable by a lot of the meta warriors such as Dalvi, Ludmila, Christina, and Yuri. Although that's the case, she is not anywhere near immune. She still gets killed by Angelica pretty easily, as well as Eden if she's not buffed by Albion. Libya also takes care of her pretty easily. And when she's unbuffed, Dalvi, a supercharged Christina, or Yuri could potentially get rid of her as well. I think one of the main reasons why she's still really popular right here at 8 out of 10 is due to the fact that almost every team is running Nartis, and Grandholder effectively counters Nartis. Not only does she not die at higher skill levels, she kills Nartis in the process as well. So overall, Grandholder is just really solid. Alongside Grandholder in the same tier, we have Glacia. Glacia is a bit of an investment. She requires plus 15 to function. Anything below plus 15 just does not work, because at plus 15 she has this skill that effectively allows her to take 0 additional damage. So the only form of damage that she'll take is the base damage that allows her to survive units like Libya, Angelica, or Eden, and lots of other warriors as well. The downside to Glacia is that she is not immune to DOT. So Christina can kill her unless you give her DOT immunity. Such supporters that do that include Michaela, so that's one way that you can work around her weakness to Christina. Couple that with Refi's buff, and Glacia can be pretty damn hard to kill. In possibly the lower tiers of Arena, like Silver to Platinum, I don't know, I do think it's quite hard to get rid of a plus 15 Glacia. So if you have a plus 15 Glacia at that kind of tier, that can definitely improve your team defensively, so you might want to look into her a little bit. Plus, Glacia also has that cat skin. That's a big reason to use her. Anyway, jokes aside, that about does it for Glacia. Let's have a look at the defenders in good tier. Now, Sheena for me here was quite a hard choice. I put her here because her usage among the top 10 players was a fat 0, and that's kind of sad to see. But I still think Sheena is really good, especially if you ruin her on defense with a little bit of HP. She can potentially survive Dalvi, and crucially survive Angelica as well. If you have that along with Michaela's buff, which gives her DOT immunity, she can also survive Christina, leaving her vulnerable to only units like Yuri and Eden. But the great thing about Sheena, and her strongest selling point, is really her ability to taunt when it's not her turn yet. So having Sheena in your team, if you kill one of the opponent's mercenaries, Sheena will automatically get a taunt plus a defense boost, and on top of that still, she gets crit rate and crit damage according to the number of enemy graves. Beyond that, she also hits 3 tiles in skip, so that's a very nice bonus. Coupled with her high crit rate and crit damage as the match progresses, she can even take out Grandholder during the later stages of the match. Sometimes I have Sheena take out Nartis or Dalvi when she's in human form. I play her late purposely just for that usage. And yeah, Sheena is just a really good unit. I think all the way up to even Ruby, you will still see a lot of people playing Sheena, maybe even Grandmaster. A lot of people play Sheena. So if you play her right, you should be able to get quite a bit of benefit out of her. And I can definitely see players even up to Ruby benefiting from having Sheena. One more point to note is that she does not require a plus 15 in order to be usable like Glacia. Highly recommend Sheena. Okay, now let's look at Leclis and Cecilia. I think they're kind of in niche roles. They happen to be used by one team in the top 10, both of them. So for Leclis, I would imagine that she's only practical in arena defense, and she's really good because for the first 5 turns of the match, and well, I guess every other 5 turns in alternation, she gets a taunt. So when you're being attacked and you don't have the advantage of going first, having Legless in your team gives your team taunt for the first 5 turns. And sometimes that means a lot, because if the opponent is playing in the same row as you, if they have Christina going first, which would normally absolutely wipe out your row, if you had Legless, Christina is going to hit Legless instead, thus saving potentially 3 mercenaries in your row. And I've used Legless in my defense quite a bit, and she seems to be pretty good. My defense rate in Ruby and Grandmaster is about 30+%, which I think is decent. I noticed that without Legless, it goes down to sub 30%. So Legless is cool to use. Wouldn't put her in very good or broken tier, definitely, but she's viable and used in some scenarios. Okay, Cecilia, on the other hand, also has some sort of a niche function. You would pretty much only use Cecilia to counter Nartis. I don't think there's really all that much of a usage for Cecilia otherwise. You could run her in some sort of unique setup, but in an ordinary formation, I just think while Cecilia is good for providing that function, most teams like to go on the offensive. So for example, why play Cecilia if you could play Eden in her place? Eden is going to provide a lot more value to your team and probably take out the opponent's Nartis before it even gets to their turn, thus making Cecilia's role kind of obsolete. So while Cecilia is good and can be good, she might potentially save your teams. I imagine she might be useful in the lower tiers of Arena, where people can't get rid of her too easily. But once you reach about Crystal to Sapphire onwards maybe, you might find that having another mercenary in place of Cecilia might be of more value to your team. Oh my god, I've been speaking for about 45 minutes. Okay. Generally, magicians and supporters, there's not that much to talk about, so I'll try to wrap up as soon as possible. Okay, magicians, a very short list as you guys can tell. Almost broken at Nartis, almost broken because he's really good and pretty much everyone plays him, but he gets absolutely hard countered by units like Goliath with her skeletons and Grenhilder, so I just wouldn't consider him absolutely broken. Plus, his 100% defense comes in the form of a skill that can be removed by a nullifier. So Yuri is going to be able to kill Nartis even with his 100% defense active. I don't think he deserves to be in like a really broken tier, but as you can tell from his usage, he's definitely really good. If you can get rid of Grenhilder and just somehow make sure that he doesn't hit skeletons, Nartis is going to be the winning piece for you. He is especially useful to teams that just run a straight line formation. Even if people play Cecilia in front, you could just have Dalvi or Eden as an initiator, get rid of Cecilia, and with the advantage in attacking where you get to go first, your Nartis can just wipe the entire row off the surface of the earth, and that's primarily his kind of usage. Obviously, you want him to be plus 12 or higher, where he has the spell memorization skill that allows him to attack continuously, and I guess that's what separates him from most other magicians. In fact, all other magicians. He's able to attack every single turn from turn 2 onwards. So that leaves only really one other magician that makes it to this list, given how much Nartis dominates, and that is Libya. Now, Libya is an interesting case because we have to consider her plus 15 coming soon. We don't know what extra skills Libya is going to get at that point, but if they do turn out to be pretty frightening, I can see Libya going up to or even surpassing the stage of Nartis. However, because the skills aren't out just yet, I'm still going to leave her in the very good tier. It's just not good to assume that she's going to be better than Nartis. We don't know. The biggest drawback of Levia, I guess, would be her requirement to be at plus 10 skill level. Now, I know she one-shots the mercenary in the center when she's plus 0, but that's often not enough if you want to use Levia competitively in the arena. I believe that if you do happen to have Libya, you can still use her up to maybe Diamond or Crystal, but beyond that, Libya really needs to be plus 10 in order to compete for a spot on your team alongside Nautis. If you decide to run 2 Magicians, then sure, you can run Nautis and Libya, but if you're in a spot where you have to choose 1 Magician, if Libya is not plus 10 with her extra range, I think everyone would choose Nautis over Libya. Okay, done. That about does it for Magicians. This will get a bit more complicated with one upcoming mercenary from the Korea server that isn't out for us just yet, so I'm gonna leave it out in this section for now. Moving on to supporters. Number 1, Refethia. Who disagrees with that? Get out of the room right now, because Refethia is just obviously broken. Not just broken, she's broken times 2. Just comparing her skills to the skills of other supporters, you can tell that there's just no comparison, right? She gives very good stats offensively with her attack buff, crit rate buff, crit damage buff, and she is also unique in that she gives all the mercenaries in her range the ability to reflect damage. And it is precisely because of this that so many other mercenaries have just fallen out of the meta completely, such as Wilhelmina, such as Anastasia, who were really thriving before Refi came along, because any mercenary that doesn't have 100% defense will just die due to the reflect buff that Refi gives. So Refi is the true definition of a game changer, and that's just offensively. Defensively, she also has a Purify, which removes all removable debuffs from everyone in her range. She also gives quite a lot of reduced incoming damage, support times 30% I believe, which is quite a lot. That's about 50% reduced incoming damage. And the worst / good part of it all is her buff range at plus 12. No other support has such an insane range, and with this kind of range comes all sorts of possibilities. Plus, the buff is so good that you probably don't need another supporter at all. So needless to say, Refi just absolutely dominates the supporter role. Anyway, moving on to the very good tier. We have Beliath, Albion, and Verona, and I guess once again, Asthma, the line between very good and good here can be kind of grey. As you can tell from the usage rates, they're all pretty similar. Beliath will be getting her companion soon. She's still decent right now, with her skeletons causing a lot of trouble, especially in World Arena. But I personally, if you don't have Beliath right now, or even if you have her but at plus 0, I would suggest that you wait for her skills to be released before you see if you want to invest in her. Because then if she doesn't turn out to be that great, you can leave Beliath as she is, or if you don't have her, you don't have to get her. But on the other hand, if her skills turn out to be really amazing, you can then opt to get her at plus 9 from Jumpstart Quest 2. Although I put her in this tier, don't rush to build her, just wait a little bit and we'll see. Okay, the next mercenary here is Albion. Albion is kind of a pain to deal with. I imagine teams in the lower tiers might struggle against Albion formations quite a lot, because before your warriors get to plus 15, they're usually a little hard to use and lacking in damage. Albion just multiplies that suffering. But that is why I suggest you can go for Yuri, because if your Yuri goes later than Albion while the taunt is still active, chances are Yuri will be able to kill Albion, so even if you struggle to kill the mercenary that he's buffing, at least there'll be no Albion in the next turn. While he's annoying to deal with, he's just not as broken as Refi, which places him in very good tier for now. If you want to use Albion though, especially in the really high tiers of Arena, I would recommend that you plus 15 him. This though comes down to pretty much just me looking at his skills. I personally don't have Albion, I never summoned for him, so I can't really say, but I would imagine that you want him as highly skilled as possible. Up next, we have Verona. Verona is also a recent addition to this tier, just like how Yuri is for warriors. Veronia recently received a companion that allows her to give 98 or so % defense to whoever she's buffing. This is quite versatile because she can essentially buff units like Alec, who is a really good unit apart from his lack of defense, and that difference essentially makes Alec really usable all of a sudden. She can also be used for Cecilia, for Ludmila, and just a lot of mercenaries in general, which I imagine is why she is still used a little bit among the top 10 teams. She also does not really require that much skill levels. Again, I might be wrong with this because I don't use Veronia, but at plus 10 that's where she grants that 98% defense to whoever she's buffing. So I imagine that's the most crucial part, and which is why I have her skill level at plus 10 there. Okay, finally, the last mercenary to go through here. We have Asthma. Personally, from my experience, I find Asthma Narcissus combos very annoying to deal with. If I had Asthma, I wouldn't need to waste my first initiator on Dalvi. I could do Asthma on the front line at the top and then have Yuri initiate in the middle row or something like that. That gives me 2 times as many chances to get rid of a mercenary and proc Sheena's taunt, which I feel like would be really helpful to my team. Unfortunately, I don't have Asthma at sufficient skill levels, it's not even close. He needs to be at least plus 6 to be able to actually one-shot opponent mercenaries. So yeah, that being said though, obviously Asthma also has his weaknesses. Although you can use Veronia plus Asthma combo to kind of mitigate this, if you don't have Veronia going with your Asthma, he will die when he's attacking Grandholder or Glacia. Obviously as well, he gets stuck on Lucius with Lucius's Death Guard. He also does nothing to 100% defense mercenaries such as Angelica and Eden and Dalvi, which is why I think not that many people use Asthma anymore. The increasing trend of 100% defense mercenaries nowadays just means that we're gonna see less of Asthma. Unless you already have him near plus 6 or higher, I don't think you should invest in him right now. Okay, phew, it's finally done. Holy crap. Man, that took a lot of time. Anyway, another part that I kind of want to just show off is the usage rates of mercenaries per category in the career server. Especially for free-to-play players, I think it's always useful to look at career server because they're currently still ahead of us. That might not be the case several months down the road, but for now, that is still the case. And that usually gives you quite a bit of an idea of which upcoming mercenaries are going to be good. Let's start off with magicians, because that's kind of the most eye-catching one. Helga, which is an upcoming magician, which if you've looked at her skills is kind of more of a support than a magician. But yeah, she actually overtook Nartis in terms of usage. So wow. Before I knew about Helga, I was considering getting my Nartis up to plus 15 after I work on Refethea, but I might retract that thought now that I look at this. Of course, Helga is still pretty recent in the career meta, so those numbers might change, but she's definitely worth looking out for. On the defender side of things, I think that's pretty much the same as what we have in our servers currently. And in supporters as well, I don't think there's much of a change either. For warriors, we have Eden at number 1, of course, followed by Angelica and actually Dalvi making a comeback, overtaking Yuri, with Christina, Ludmila, and Ventana not far off behind. Now, note that Ventana here has her companion, which we're not going to get until, I believe, April 26th. I'm not sure, you have to reference my developer notes video for that. Funny that I forgot, even though I came up with the list. But yeah, that kind of gives you an idea of how useful Ventana is going to be in terms of usage. So you might want to think about that before you start drawing companions for Ventana. So yeah, anyway, that's pretty much all I want to show you about the career server. By the way, this list was provided by Tachibana. I'll leave a link to his post in the description below. He's done a lot of things for the community, so definitely check him out if you're interested. Let's move on to the final and perhaps the most critical part of this video, and that is my picks for new players in Bronze to Crystal. Obviously, I'm going to talk about tips for advanced players in Sapphire to Grandmaster, but let's start with players in Bronze to Crystal first. Now, we have the Jumpstart quest free 6th level. I'm not too sure how that works if you create your account after the Jumpstart quest thing has begun. I don't know if it's still around, but if it is and you haven't chosen yet, or if you're not far off after choosing and you realize you didn't choose Refi here, I will actually, I don't normally say this, but I think for this it's really important that you choose Refi, because her status as a supporter is just absolutely dominating, and it's something that no other 6th level can probably ever reach. Nautis, as we can see, is already kind of declining a little bit. With the plus 15 Octos coming up soon, I do expect Nautis usage to go down quite a bit as well. He is by no means bad. Nautis is really, really good. Angelica is really, really good, and so are many other 6th levels. But Refi is just something that will stay good for the longest time ever. And plus 12 Refi is literally a game changer. So there's not going to be any dispute about it for me. You have to get Refi for your free 6th level and plus 12 her as soon as possible. Okay, for warriors, defenders, magicians, and supporters, I'm going to imagine a scenario where I had an empty team right now, and I have to pick and start focusing on a few first. Going by that, I think all of the 4 warriors that I have shown there are very much viable. If you're looking for someone to kind of carry your team in the early stages, I will still recommend Dalvi, because Dalvi deals defense ignoring damage and has 100% defense, which in the earlier stages, in the absence of Eden, will be quite dominant. Ludmilla is also something good to try to invest in. However, if you're a beginner, chances are you're not going to have good enough HP runes to really make Ludmilla work really well. Also not forgetting that your Refi isn't plus 12 yet. Ludmilla, I'm not sure how effective she can really be unless you have a plus 12 Refi, so maybe not yet. However though, if you already have one of them, almost plus 15 or something, and you're looking to start building another one, you can pick any of the 4. So I've also included the skill levels at the bottom of the icons, which I will highly recommend that you get them too, and don't focus on other things until you get them to that skill level. Obviously, if you're waiting on more 5-star skill books or you're sort of at a hard cap, then yes, go ahead and focus on other things. But if you had skill books to plus 15 Dalvi, for example, don't go ahead and use those skill books for a plus 0 Yuri to bring her from plus 0 to plus 3. Focus on Dalvi and get her to plus 15 first before you use those books on anyone else. For legendary warriors, there's only really Angelica to use. For beginners, I'm not going to recommend a plus 15 here, but if you do want to use Angelica, you have to get her to plus 12. She's going to be pretty important to get rid of Kali, Sheena, Grandholder at the lower tiers, and if you can get her at plus 12, that's going to be 100% defense for you, and you should be able to get quite a bit out of that. Seto eventually might get included in this list, but for now I'm just going to leave him out because, once again, I don't know his skills. We're going to have to wait for that. Moving on to defenders, I've highlighted Glacia and Sheena. I think Cecilia and Leclis might be kind of useful depending on what kind of meta you're facing in your current tier. But really Cecilia can be used at like plus 0 if you're just using her to guard against Nautis, because even at plus 15 she pretty much dies to Dalvi in one hit, and even a well buffed Yuri. So if you do want to use her to guard against Nautis, you can just grab one Cecilia and leave her at plus 0 for now. I think more importantly, you should be focusing on Sheena and Glacia. Sheena for me was a game changer, and she was a game changer when she was first released because before then we were kind of depending on Walia, who's a support, to give taunt on the very first turn without having a defender actually move first to taunt. Not only that, as I mentioned before, she has good range, good attack, and this ability to taunt is just beyond amazing, especially for new players. So Sheena, definitely get her. Glacia is going to be a bit more of an investment. Sheena, although I've put plus 14 for Sheena there, she can still be used as you're building her, because I think she gets the taunt skill pretty early on, or if not at +0, I'm not too sure. But you can definitely start using her even at really low skill levels. For Glacia though, it's a bit of a high investment with high reward. You have to plus 15 her, otherwise she's pretty much unusable really. So yeah, if I had to choose a first defender, it would be Sheena. At the bottom, as usual, I have Lucius and Grenhilder as my picks for defenders. Lucius at +0, Grenhilder you can actually purchase with ancient coins, so that might be kind of nice. But if you're an absolute beginner and you're not really struggling too much on defense, I might abstain on Grenhilder for now, because Libya and her companion is coming soon. And if the future Octos with their companions can beat Grenhilder pretty easily, I'm not too sure if Grenhilder might be on my list anymore. So if you're absolutely new and you're not really struggling with no defenders to use and stuff, I wouldn't purchase Grenhilder. Otherwise, she is still a solid pick and you can go ahead with her. Next up, we have Magicians. So obviously not between Nautis and Levia as she is right now, it's just going to be Nautis. I will recommend people get Nautis and get him up to +12 if possible. But once again, because Octo companions are coming soon and Levia is competing right there, you might not want to... I still think you should get Nautis, but you might not want to get him to +12 too quickly. Maybe have him at plus... I can't really remember which it was, but once he gets permanent taunt ignore and 100% defense, I think that's around +9 or +10. That's definitely good enough. You can even use him at +3 or +6. Even then, he gets his main job done. So if you're new, don't really rush Nautis for now, because he might not be as good in the future, but definitely do get him, just leave him at a lower skill level. Last but not least, we have supporters. Now, although I've highlighted Goliath and Albion here, you're gonna have Refi, right? So most of the time, if you can get Refi to +12, you can just run her as the only supporter in your team. However, if you want to do some wacky Goliath formations, which is definitely a legitimate strategy, or if you want to enhance your defense with Albion plus Grenhilder combo or something like that, I can also see that helping your team, then go ahead and get the both of them. But here's my advice for this. Focus on building at least 1 to 2 warriors, defenders, and Nautis as the magician. Build them to max before you even think about having Albion and Goliath, because if you don't have a maxed out warrior or defender, that's going to be way more disadvantages to your team than it is to just not have Albion, for example. So yeah, focus on warriors, defenders, and magician before you get supporters, because you already have Refi. That about does it for my picks for players in Bronze to Crystal. Once again, I want to emphasize that although this is really important to know, in terms of which mercenaries are good for the arena, which will stay good in the meta, etc., a big part of it will also be coming up with formations. So you can go ahead and invest in these mercenaries, but if you're not really improving in arena, don't worry, because it's most likely a formation issue rather than your mercenaries being bad. I'll do a video on that to help you guys out sometime soon. Now, my advice for the more advanced players in Sapphire to Grandmaster is just save your diamonds, skill books, ancient coins, whatever resources you want to save. Just save them all, because the Octos are coming and the meta is going to be changing really rapidly. I expect that once the Octos come, you might see a few mercenaries just disappear from the list that I've just covered. So especially when you're already at this rank, I don't think you should be desperate to improve your rank all that much. Just a personal story that I would like to share, I guess. I remember when Dalvi first got her companion. At the time, the 6th level rework and jumpstart quest was coming in Korea, and I was short on skill books. I had a few, but it's definitely not going to be enough for me to max out Dalvi. So what I did was I just sacrificed being able to climb in arena for that 1 month. I did not have Dalvi in my team, whereas everyone else did, and my rank was decreasing every week. Just by a little bit, but definitely decreasing. I held on to that, saved all my diamonds, did not draw for Dalvi. I just drew for companions using my scrolls, and when the 6th level rework came, I got myself a +9 Dalvi. With the companions that I summoned before using scrolls, I managed to get her to +13 or +14 or so, where she's kind of usable. I +15 her later on, but most importantly, although I dropped like from Sapphire to Crystal during that time, I saved up enough resources. I got myself soul gears for Refi, maxed them all out, and just waited for Refi to come, and I just splurged all my diamonds on Refi, got Refi +12 immediately, and that season I went to Grandmaster from Crystal. So yeah, just sharing my experience on why you should probably save. You really don't have to be a whale to make that big of a jump in arena, but it does take this kind of patience. I would say 36,000 diamonds would be good, because then you can guarantee yourself 2 Octo companions when that comes, and you should be able to instantly +12 either Seto or Goliath with the Jumpstart Quest 2. If you've already been saving your legend skill books, which I have as well, I'm not using them on any legendaries because I want to use them on the Octos if they turn out to be really good. So I definitely urge you guys to do that as well. And trust me, when the Octos come and you manage to get all their companions, it's gonna be really, really worth it. I'm just trying to think if there's anything I didn't cover, because there's just so much content when I try to explain tier lists. It's not straightforward when it comes to a game like Brave 9. Okay, so I'll do a summary right here, because I know the video is going to be long as hell, so if you don't want to watch anything else in this video, here's what you need to know, at least. If you want to know which mercenaries are relevant in the meta right now, you can go ahead and look at my tier lists for warriors, defenders, magicians, and supporters. I talk about them in depth, obviously, as I go through the video, but you could just stop by and have a look and skip the explanations if you don't have time. However, while you can go ahead and draw for those mercenaries in the tier lists, I know for newer players struggling to climb from silver to gold or gold to platinum, something like that, this might be more relevant to you. But if you can help it, still just try to save all your diamonds, in particular your diamonds, skill books, and ancient coins if you can. If you're a beginner and you just have loads of ancient coins, say like 3,000, 4,000 and above ancient coins, sure, you can go ahead and spend them on getting new legendaries, but otherwise you should just be purchasing the legend skill books every month, and that's it, if you want to play extra safe. The reason I mentioned saving your diamonds instead of your scrolls is because you can use your diamonds to summon legendary companions, whereas you can't really use your premium scrolls to do so. So if there's any non-legendary 5-star mercenaries that you really want, you can still use your scrolls on them. Okay, I hope that kind of helps with you guys who are struggling to climb in arena. At least after this video, if you've properly sat down and watched it, hopefully you can understand the rationale behind why certain mercenaries are good, and also get a sense of which mercenaries you should be looking at if you want to improve your arena rank and arena team. In a future video, I will cover how to properly place these mercenaries that I've mentioned in this video to set up a good formation such that you can bring out the best of those mercenaries. But yeah, that's it for this video. Whoever actually watches this entire video, my sincerest applause to you, because wow, this video is going to be like an hour long or so, by the looks of it. Okay, I shouldn't drag it any longer than it has to be. Bye!